Okay, the next thing we want to talk about is inverse functions. We need inverse functions. Okay, might hear a little thunder. Don't worry, it's not going to strike you through the video. Okay, so it's a very simple concept. Now, it doesn't mean the algebra of it's always simple, but in most of what we do in this course, it is. So the graphs are actually quite simple. And the algebra that we do is going to be pretty simple if you accept a couple of things. Okay, so first of all, we start with the graph of your basic exponential function. And we're going to do, or the table for the basic exponential function. We're going to do a table for the inverse function. Okay? Once you have the table for the exponential function, table for the inverse function is really, really easy. You just reverse the numbers in the columns. Take the numbers in the second column, put them in the first column. Take the numbers in the first column, put them in the second column. So x values are going to be 1/4, 1/2, 1, 2, and 4. Mimicking the second column. And in the first column, you've got -2, -1, 0, 1, 2. That's it. That's the basic inverse. That's a basic function. Well, let's see. The basic function log base 2 of x is inverse to the basic exponential function. That's it. So there's a new basic function. You got to know. Got to be able to graph anytime you need it. You got to be able to graph it quickly. Part of your vocabulary of functions, not something you punch into a calculator, look at the graph, say, gee, ain't that pretty? Something that you have almost visceral relationship with because you've done this, and you can always do this from now for the rest of your life. Okay? At least you get to my age and start forgetting everything. Okay, so that's it. Now, for homework, I'm going to ask you to do this and sketch the graph. And then compare the graph with the graph of the 2 to the x function. And there's also, if you've done the chapter 4 sections, all 3 of them, you're going to recognize some of the operations that occur in abstract groups, okay, groups of rotations and flips and so forth. You're going to recognize what 2 operations can be put together to convert this graph to this graph. So that's kind of an extra. Okay, now here we have the graph, or the table, not the whole table for the basic squaring function. Okay, so this is your basic squaring function. Partial table. And you can fill in the rest, you know, the -1/2 and the 1/2. Just for brevity, because you don't need to watch me do 7 points when I can watch me do 5. There it is. Okay? Well, now we're going to do the inverse relation. Now, I'm not saying inverse function because it's what you get when you invert the columns. When you switch the columns, is not going to be a function. So you would do this. Your x column would be 4, 1, 0, 1, 4. Your y column would be -2, -1, 0, 1, 2. Okay? This isn't a function. If I tell you what x is, are you going to be able to tell me what y is? Yeah. If I tell you x is 0, you can tell me what y is, can't you? Yeah. Now, if I tell you x is 4, what are you going to tell me for y? You could tell me -2, you could tell me 2, or you could answer honestly and say, if you ask for a value, I can't give you one, because there are 2 values here. Okay, and when you have to say that, it's not a function. If you have to say that for even 1 point, it's not a function. function. There's exactly one answer to what's the value of this function when I give you this number for any number in its domain. So what we have to do is very simple. Okay, we're just going to eliminate this and this. And then we're going to write it down where we don't have anything here. Nothing, 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 nothing. But we've got 0, 0, and we've got 1, 1, and we've got 4, 2. You can graph that. You could graph this, with all 5 points or all 7 points if you do the whole table. You can graph it, but it's not going to be a function. It's going to fail the vertical line test. For the same reason that you can't give me just one answer when I tell you when I give you the value of x, unless x has to be 0. Okay, so that's it. That's what inverse functions are. Okay, so I'm going to ask you to do those, and I'm going to ask you to graph this function here. And I'm going to ask you to do a little bit more with it. But these are 2 inverse functions. Now, there's also, I'm probably going to ask you to also make the table and do the graph for the inverse function of the reciprocal function and the reciprocal square function. And probably for the cubic function too. It's important to see those graphs and understand how they're shaped and understand what they mean.